welcome for the very first ever This Might Be Coffee. My name is Michael O'Day. I'm here with Mike Plating. I am a real estate agent, been a real estate agent for about over 19 years. Michael, tell a little bit about you and your loan lending process.
Been a loan officer a little more than 19 years. It gets to a point where you don't really want to say too many years. so yeah, I've got some...
You don't want to date yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to date myself, but at the same time, lots of experience. But looking forward to this. I know something we wanted to do for a long time. A lot of knowledge that's been sitting in our head over these years, and it's nice to be able to hopefully get it out and to educate people as far as what's going on.
Cool. What I want everyone to know, this is not going to be your typical real estate lender podcast. This is a no bullshit, no holds barred discussion, real life, going to give you people a little bit of education, have some fun in the process, but it's not going to be scripted. This is all, we may have notes we're going off of and all, but it's just us having a conversation, my opinions, Mike's opinions about what's good and bad with real estate lending and the whole process. So if anybody has any, if you do have questions, I want you to send an email to thismightbecoffee@gmail.com. I'll put that onto the bottom of the feed afterwards. But again, thismightbecoffee, one word, @gmail.com. So anything you want to say before?
And again, there are opinions. It's collective knowledge over the last so many years we've been doing this. Other people might have different opinions, but I think that we come at it at an aspect of looking at both sides, and we aren't going to agree.
I
know you're going to be wrong plenty of times. I'm going to have to correct you, and that's fine.
It happens both ways, but
I think again, it's about just two people that like to we discuss these things anyways when we're discussing clients or discussing new ways to educate people. So we're like, well, why not put it on this podcast so this way we can give it to more people.
Right, and we're trying to tap into people that there's an opinion out there that real estate and lending is one way. That's not the case. There are times that you can be creative and not, we'll get into the whole, there was law changes and I want to get into that. And Mike's got we both got a good opinion about that, but we'll get into that. That's actually one of our topics today. We're going to get into the whole thing. So the topics we're going to cover are going to be very, very broad since this is our first podcast and I'm talking to you now, not to him. The first podcast, we're going to briefly cover the buyer's agency agreement that has been forced upon us with these new laws. We're going to talk about getting pre-approval before showing houses. And what was the one you want to talk about? Oh, yeah.
And rates. I think that one of the big fallacies as far as let's wait till the rate drops. And I think that's one of the worst ideas ever. And I'll explain a little bit reason why for that.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too, because everyone's waiting for 3.5%. That is never, ever, ever coming back. Good luck with that. Anyway, that's it. Let's get into the down and dirty. What do you want to broach first?
I'll let you take the lead here. What would you like to start with?
I'll do the easy one first because we're going to disagree on topic 2 initially, and I want to get out of that. What I want to talk about, and I know you probably have some opinions on this as well. Ever since August 17th of, is that 23 or 24? Do you remember when the law changed? It was 2024. 24. That's right, because we're on 26 now. It's been 2 years. August 17th of 2024. The laws changed because realtors had gotten too greedy. They weren't negotiating commissions. They were saying buyers have to pay, the seller has to pay low commission, and it's not negotiable, blah, 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 blah. The part of that rule, that whole law change is a whole podcast in itself. The reason that I want to bring up this buyer's agency agreement is because it was thrust upon me when I went looking for houses for my daughter in Iowa this weekend. The buyer's agency agreement is an agreement between a buyer's agent and a buyer, okay? They've always been around, but they've never been mandatory. Now they are mandatory that you must sign a buyer's agency agreement. And what that buyer's agency agreement says that the buyer is going to get X amount of dollars, okay? X amount of percentage of the house sale. How this has panned out is it's given realtors an extra layer of greed now to not negotiate their commission. That's part one. And the other part is every realtor is going to tell you that you need to sign this before you see the house. That's not true. There are ways around it, but they're going to force it upon you. And I want you to understand your rights is if you are going into a purchase part where you're not going to be represented by a real estate agent. You're going to be a sole person. I'm looking at this house for myself. There will be no buyer's agent. You do not have to sign that agreement. And I want everyone to know this. Go ahead.
So let me ask you this, though,
Yeah.
because obviously I work with lots of different realtors, not just Mike. And
That's his downfall.
so part of do more business. I don't have to. Yeah, that's why I'm part of this.
All right, fine.
So I think one of the big things is that, I look at it two ways from everyone I've different talked to. And I see your point that this is, there was a lot of greed going on. I think part of like the standard 5% or 6%, let's just use 5%, seems to be the standard in Illinois, has been 2.5 on the buyer side and the sell side.
Right.
And, when loans were $2,000, $3,000, $400,000, there's a purchase prices, that was a certain level. As these houses have unfortunately gotten crazy and now they're $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 properties.
Right.
This is where I think people are like, well, I'm spending this amount of money to possibly, it's been on the seller side to sell this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the buyer's agreement is they're now worried that the selling side and a lot of selling agents were at the point where like, well, we'll still get ours from the seller, but we'll push it on the buyer side. And in one way, at least on the lending side, I would look at this as a little unfair because now you're saying that, okay, well, when you bought your house, the seller paid for your 2.5%, but now you're selling your house, you don't want to pay the 2.5% that the buyer is now going into the house. So let me ask this. My first question to you would be like, you're saying it's not mandatory without signing these ahead of time, but it's not mandatory. How does that work then? Because then if the seller says no, and the buyer, let's say, says I'm only going to pay 1%, 1.25%, how does that affect you going forward? Because now you're kind of stuck with that lower commission.
Well, here's the thing. That happened before. The 2.5% commission, the 5% divided in half, was never always the rule. Prior to August 17th, if the buyer side, let me rewind because I'm skipping like everyone knows what's going on. When a seller signed a listing agreement, they're agreeing to pay so much commission. It's like we said, it's usually 5%. And normally it's divided. 2.5 goes to the buyer's agent, 2.5 goes to the seller's agent. That's always been the process. But it's never been required to be 5%. It's been the industry standard, but never been required. Prior to August 17th, a listing could be 4%, where the listing side is getting 2 and the buyer side is getting 2. Okay? This is where I get frustrated. Prior to 2024, August 17th, if the listing side was offering me as a buyer's agent 2%, I got 2%. There was no negotiations around it. What has happened now is with these buyer's agency agreements, if they sign a buyer's agency agreement that says 2.5% and the selling side is only offering 2%, the buyer himself or herself now has to come up with the extra 0.5%. Now their price is in essence increased on the house by another 0.5%. That's the part that gets me so aggravated, is because prior to this rule, if it was 2, I got 2. There was I could negotiate for more, but they could say no, it's not more. And someone could kill a deal for it, which didn't happen then. Now I'm seeing deals that are getting totally obliterated because the buyer's agent isn't getting their 3% or 2.5% because the buyer doesn't want to pay the extra money.
All right, so you're seeing the concern then more as that if the buyer is, saying, hey, now that I know I don't have to do this, I'm not going to sign this, or I will sign it, but I'm going to pay, I'm not going to pay the 3%. So
here's the thing. Once they sign, they didn't have that option. They signed, they're paying.
So let's say you're selling a property and you want 2.5. That's what's already been negotiated, that your buyer signed the agreement to begin with. You go out there, and the seller says, I'm only going to give you 2. So you're saying that there's a lot of realtors out there saying, well, then I'm going to tell the buyer the deal didn't work, because I'm assuming legally they're supposed to say, well, here's what they're offering and have the negotiation. But you're thinking, let's say the buyer, let's say maybe it's an FHA deal or a smaller conventional deal where they don't have that extra 0.5%. Sometimes people are that tight.
Correct.
That the agents out there are sometimes saying, well, deal's not going to go through, versus taking what's been negotiated or having a conversation with the buyer.
Correct. They're saying that they can't negotiate that commission now, which is, again, the whole reason this lawsuit happened was because realtors weren't negotiating contracts. At this point, and this is my opinion, not the opinion of anybody else in this room, my opinion only, I see another class action lawsuit happening because the buyer side is now not negotiating. They're saying, I'm getting 2.5% no matter what, which I think, again, is giving people another reason to be greedy. That's the one thing that I totally...
So basically, I think it's just flip-flop from one side being greedy to the other side being greedy. Or
Correct.
Change.
They're both being greedy. Because the way that I do it, I have in my buyer's agency agreement, it's a fluctuating scale. And it says whatever's negotiated prior to closing in the contract, that's what I'm getting paid, or any of my agents are getting paid. I gives them the flexibility to now negotiate that buyer's agency commission. And a lot of realtors are going to say that I'm devaluing myself. No, I'm not. I'm not devaluing myself. Sometimes a deal needs a higher commission, and those usually aren't negotiated. They're giving you something. It's talking sometimes on the deals that where you're pinching a couple of pennies. People who need help are the ones who aren't getting the help because they're smaller side commissions, and it's usually on the lower price houses that they're only offering 1%, 2%, 1.5%, and they're the ones getting screwed.
Yeah, I think that it's a slippery slope because I know what I do as a lender and how hard I work, and with realtors, especially back when there was a seller's market, you might have to show a buyer house after house after house, contract after contract after contract, and it's because people were getting outbid and things like that.
Oh, that's still happening, but yeah.
The buyer side realtor, in both sides work hard. Okay, let's talk about it.
They do.
But those who are the buyer side realtor at times probably have to work a little harder in certain cases, just because of the fact that, because you don't put the house on the market, it's a beautiful house, chances are it's going to sell.
Correct.
You might have a buyer that has a certain type of loan which that'll be a whole nother podcast where sellers don't want the loan, even though the buyer is really well approved. Mm-hmm. You might have a buyer that, like you said, has tightness on their assets, so all of a sudden you have to do this negotiation. So
correct.
Again, I always try to look at it because I'm all about everyone being making money and also doing it the right way. And I think that because we're all in the business, we're salespeople, professional salespeople. So I kind of look at it as more of a where does it make sense, where does it not make sense, and that buyer's agreement. I guess maybe it's more of a conversation with the buyer, saying, hey, yes, it's 2.5, but if we have a chance to negotiate it, we will. If it turns out that's going to make or break the deal. Problem is, a lot of these realtor shops, whether it be the larger ones, they might have some floors in there where there's no choice. So,
correct. I agree with the floor, 100%. But 95% of them are not even saying, they're not even open to negotiation, which was my frustration. They're saying, you signed this, you pay this, that's it. There needs to be some fluctuation.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If 95% of them are doing that, and doesn't that give you a potential advantage? Because now if you're, let's say, talking to that same client,
it does.
Negotiable, and the other side's not, I would imagine that would help you honestly keep your buyers.
That's the main reason I started my own firm, was to be able to be flexible and to help people. 100%, 100%. The other thing I want to get into in regards to this, not that this topic's over, this could be a whole podcast in itself, and I experienced this myself. There are times that you as a buyer don't want a buyer's agent. You might think you know enough about real estate. I know a lot about it, so I don't necessarily need a buyer's agent. If I find the house myself, what is happening is you're going to see the house and they're saying you have to sign this agreement before I can show you this home. And the agreement is stating that they are now your agent and you will owe them 2.5%. This is a slippery slope as well. And I will give you this advice. As a buyer, not wanting to have a buyer's agent, always set up the showings with the listing agent because they're getting paid already. They're getting paid their listing side commission. When you sign the agreement to have them represent you, they are now getting paid twice. They're getting paid the listing side and the buyer side. If the listing agent is showing you the property, you don't have to sign the thing. If they keep telling you have to sign, you have to sign, you have to sign, walk away. They will change their mind and say, oh, come on in. Or if they're forcing you to sign, there's a spot on this agreement that says, I am represented by X. It'll be the person's name or the company. fill in that part and say, I am represented by no one. Put the words no one, nobody, myself, your own name, whatever it is, and then sign the agreement.
So I think the thing that's kind of tough about that is it's a lot of information for a buyer to remember. And I think this is where we probably would disagree. And again, I'm a lender, I'm not a realtor, but just from what I would see with a lot of buyers, especially ones that, first-time homeowners and things like that, it's easy to get confused. I mean, there's websites out there right now that, because it'll say, hey, it's, this is listed by so-and-so, or it's that person paid for that website. So they'll think that's the person they need to talk to and find out that, hey, it's not necessarily someone I have to talk to. So I think where there's a lot of confusion there. And I would imagine it'd be very hard to do that. So I get what you're saying there, but just from an objective point of view, I would think I kind of still would lean, and again, I'm not in that part of it, towards that.
And that's the thing. If they're a first-time homeowner or a first-time home buyer, 100% get a realtor, because you're not going to know what you're doing. There are people, and this method that I'm talking about is not for everybody. I'm not saying to not sign this agreement because you don't want to pay somebody. That's a whole ball of worms, because the average person doesn't know the things that myself or about house buying, loans, and everything else. Those are the ones that need a realtor. Yes, pay them their money. But if you're doing all the work and you're negotiating the sale, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and all they're doing is opening a door for you, they don't need 2.5% of this house when they didn't really do anything. This is more for the educated person who understands the process and wants to be able to represent themselves. You'll see a lot of times somebody will represent themselves, realize how fucking hard it really is, and stop. Like, I can't do this, and they're going to bring somebody else in. So it's part of the process, but yeah.
Part of this obviously also is for realtors to hear this, because, this is, I'm sure, just like everything, there's 50% this way, 50% that way.
I'm going to piss a lot of people off at this one.
Yeah, that's why this conversation, I've been devil's advocate, because here's how I look at it.
You like disagreeing with me.
No, it's not so much that. I mean, I do like to disagree with you, but I see your point, and I also see why it's necessary, because unfortunately there's a lot of buyers, like, on the lending side, I could work with them for 5 months and go through all this stuff and take a Sunday night phone call and go through all these things and disrupt my family, and then find out that we're ready to buy a house, that all of a sudden now they're going to find out that they could save $120 in fees somewhere else and walk away after, there's 5 months of education, and I educate the crap out of my clients.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's kind of where maybe the buyer's agreement, that it's more maybe an aspect of, hey, I've done all this work. So that's where I do feel what you're saying makes sense in scenarios. And I think that's where, and we'll go into deeper scenarios with this, is that, it's almost like you could take every category and have subsets. And I think that's the whole point of this conversation, is to start the conversation, maybe ruffle a couple feathers, and then at the same time, let's get down to when it does make sense. Because at least this way, if everyone's on the same page, then I think it's about communication. So
if I'm with somebody and I'm working with them for 5 months and they haven't agreed to work with me, yeah, that's my fault for not having them sign something. This is usually the buyer agency agreement thing is in the very, very beginning. If you get to a certain point and you're doing elsewhere for somebody and they have not agreed to work with you, that's where this buyer's agency agreement comes into play, 100%.
All right, I know we got a little bit, sorry about the camera change, but one of our cameras died. This is day one of
Ignargle, so we're just trying to figure this out.
We're doing our best. So we got a little bit into the buyer's agency agreement, and we both agree that this is, we shot from, in your analogy,
we went from freshman math to advanced calculus, and so and again, this is part of the process. We're just trying to figure this out. I think that good conversations are great to have. And I think that, when we get to the weeds of things, there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's gonna come out of it that's gonna be awesome. But we're learning. Like I said, this is, and I think this next part, we do disagree on a lot of different things, but that's kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to do this together, because the end result is we both care about our clients, and that's why we work well together, because we want to get that person in the right property and that's the end goal. So the fact that we aren't rah-rah about every single scenario, I think brings a better conversation versus just, oh, yes, this is great. So that's kind of the point of it. Now, there are lots of things we do agree upon
And it makes
as well.
it real. And this is, this is the reason I have Mike as my lender of choice. Because if I say something stupid, he's going to call me out on it. And vice versa. If he says something that he doesn't understand about my client, I'm going to call him out on it. But there's that conversation that we're going to be able to have to make sure we move you forward the best way possible.
Absolutely.
So that being said, we are also, now we're going to dive into the pre-approval process.
Which we disagree some parts here too. So.
We do. And it's not as much as you think.
Yes. So
you start,
I'm going to start with this
opinion.
one. Pre-approvals, obviously I'm the lender, are without question super important for both the borrower, the client, and for the agent. Because, as far as we'll start with the agent, you want to know that your client that you're showing properties to can buy the house. And where I use this analogy to all my clients, I call it you want to make sure that you're looking at a Toyota Camry. Let me rephrase it. You don't want to go into the Ferrari dealership when you're a Toyota Camry buyer. Now, what that means is a Toyota Camry is a beautiful car. But if you just left the Ferrari dealership and then you go see a Toyota Camry because that's what you're actually approved for, all you remember is the Ferrari. So so why I think a pre-approval is important is a lot of people have a tendency, they might have a $25 mortgage payment comfortability level, okay? And we'll talk about that another time as well, how important to ask them first versus you telling them what they can afford. And so if you go show them a house, you might go show them a house they really like, and they say, Mike, I love this house. And they come back and now they do the pre-approval, and it's a $3,200 pre-approval. Right. So now once you tell them, well, no, you're not buying this $550, you're buying this $450, and then now they're going to spend or less probably at that point, really, $380, and now they see this $380 Toyota Camry, which is a beautiful house, good neighborhood, and all that kind of stuff, but they just left the Ferrari dealership.
Right.
So it's going to make it more difficult for you as a realtor and the mental part of a client to now be in a position where if this is the house I started with, then I'm more comfortable knowing this is what I can afford. But if I saw this, shiny object, now this is all where I'm going to say I'm going to see this new area and think, oh, this is no good. It's across the tracks. Well, no, it's it's more in your price range. So,
and I do agree with the pre-approval in that sentence. And before we go further, Toyota nor Ferrari have endorsed this podcast. The challenge I have with pre-approvals, and this is again, I have a challenge with a lot of people who say this is how things are done. I have a lot of people who come to me and not even come to me, and I've seen it happen to where realtors or listing agents, I can see more on the listing side, won't show a house without a pre-approval. Or you meet a client for the first time and you won't show them a home because they don't have a pre-approval. That to me is, and I understand, I love pre-approvals. It's like you can't shoot a target without bullets in the gun, and that's what a pre-approval is. It's having bullets in that gun so you can bam, 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 bam. Those are the ones that I want. But when I meet somebody for the first time, never, ever had a conversation with them besides on the phone. They don't know me from Adam. And now they're going to show me how much money that they can afford to buy a house just so I could open a door for them to get to know me. That's where we differ. When it comes to the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 showings, and I'm iffy on 5, I'm not requiring that pre-approval because they're learning me. They're learning the process. If I tell them they get a pre-approval, don't worry, it'll be good. It lasts 3 months. You can get it renewed easy. They don't know me. They don't trust me. It's kind of hard for them to build that rapport when I'm demanding that they show me that they're financially secure. It puts them in. I've seen it to where I've seen buyers literally shrink thinking that he doesn't think I can afford this place. So for me, I love pre-approvals, but I'm not going to require it to have somebody see a house.
So with that being said, I'll actually play devil's advocate on myself here.
But
on myself. So I see your point saying that you want to build that relationship. And if your number is 4 or 5, and somebody, I can say, hey, let's go out, let's meet, let's make sure. And as a lender, I will say if you have a better rapport with them after a couple times, then it's going to help as far as, hey, you should refer, you should work with my my lender who I know is going to take care of you.
Right.
So I can see that side of it. So I there is a benefit there. I agree that trying to find that sweet spot is. So I guess you could clarify it saying, hey, we want to go see a couple houses first, get a feel for it, and just like I said, hopefully that, again, they're not looking at their Ferrari, which we're not sponsored by, but
That's
that's
fine.
an analogy I've been using for so many years I can't get out of my head.
And they'll keep doing it. It's all good.
And
sponsors
so
that
this
stuff.
way, you can make sure. So if you don't get them too far into the situation, then yes, I think that can be beneficial. I guess a lot of times it's also going to matter. Is this a referral? Because if it's a referral from somebody you've already worked with, it might be easier to say, hey, the pre-approval part, because now you're already a known commodity. You're that aspect.
Correct.
So I guess in certain cases, a brand new person you've never talked to before that you just somehow got, let's say, through social media or something like that, and you're building that rapport, I can see that happening.
And
Yeah.
even after the first tour, I will mention it at the end. Oh, by the way, have you talked to a lender yet? I don't ask them, are you pre-approved? I said, have you talked to a lender? Have you talked to a bank? If they say no, then I'll mention, I got a guy who's fantastic, and then I mention my whole bullet in the gun scenario. It's great for us to keep looking at houses, but in this market, when you find one you like, you need to be able to pull that trigger, and you can't pull the trigger without the bullet in the gun. Hopefully, in that first tour, I have built enough rapport for them to trust me to call you. And you've seen this happen. I get in the car, I send you a name, they call, I'd say half the time that you talk to them. But at least I opened the door and I didn't force it down their throat.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I handle the pre-approval.
And I think that's important because they're building a relationship, and obviously there's lots of different realtors out there, and I think that's another point of it too is that where do you feel comfortable with a realtor? And what I do appreciate about you, because you do things differently than the other realtors I work with, is that just like I do different things than other lenders work with, that we all have our way of doing things, and you kind of find out where does it make the most sense. And so one thing I always appreciated about you, and not trying to blow smoke up,
That's okay. I'm used to it. I like that.
is so
I like
we'll
smoke.
cut this part out of the
It's
thing,
not getting cut
is that
ever.
you do care about your clients. And I'm not saying that other realtors don't care about their clients, because I work with only realtors that are that way. I've been blessed enough where I do enough business at this point, or have done, to where I can, just work with good people. And I think that's an important thing, because, to have a deal go through the correct way, you need to have a realtor, a loan officer, and an attorney, and they all need to be on the same page. They all need to have, and it's not about getting the deal done. Everyone thinks if I get the deal done, then I've accomplished my goals, and that's so far down the road. I mean, it's about building that rapport, making sure that we are educating them throughout the process to to have the best outcome. So,
Correct.
So that's one thing. Again, I do enjoy working with you about, because you are, hey, I'm not going to force something. I'm going to make sure that they understand what's going on. So,
Right. And there was a time that when I'm talking to somebody, I have that, and just so you know, I'm kind of truck drivery, so I swear quite a bit, so fucking get over it. There are times that I will be with a client, and in my head, I'm like, dude, it's time to shit or get off the pot. They have that coming to Jesus meeting where we've seen 15 houses. And if you've liked 8 of them and you don't want to make an offer, are you ready to make an offer? Are you ready? And now then I'll begin to force the pre-approval upon them, because now I'm wasting my time.
well, you just
There's a
said that
difference.
usually 4 to 5 deals, you'll do the pre-approval. Now you're showing 14 to 15. So
That's a coming to Jesus. Where
That's
I'm like,
coming to- okay, well,
it's
there's
either
scenarios.
you get this pre-approval, or you're going to find another person to walk with. I have enough friends. I don't need another one that's taking me away from my family, my kids, my other clients to show houses to, because you have to have a conversation.
So I think that goes more than 2 or 3.
That was rude.
I would
I'm
think
sorry.
I would think that'd be window shopping. So and that's the other thing too. That I try to, as a lender, I try to not, you're just as important as the client. 'Cause obviously, generally, I'm getting the deal from you as well. But I also try to, there's a lot of clients that just they think they want something, and then they, you get them ready to go, and then they don't. And so, and then they'll window shop, or I'm sure most realtors out there have had the client where, I put an offer in a house and then I cancel it, and then we go see 10 more houses and put an offer in a house and cancel it.
That happens so
I
often.
think that's
It's ridiculous.
So I, again, I'll stick to 1 or 2. I would agree with you on. More than that, you got to have a pre-approval.
And I do agree, but I don't get overly pushy until I feel like my time's being wasted. And then it's like, and I've fired clients, for lack of a better word, because I've shown them houses for a year, and they've had 3 or 4 deals that they've canceled because of the inspection of things that were normal issues. And we'll have an inspection situation later, but that's a different situation. But there are times there is a line that has to be drawn eventually. I just don't think it's day one. And I've seen people disregard a client day one because they don't have a pre-approval. And that to me it's just wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree. You don't, unfortunately too, the internet has made people, especially new buyers and things of the so forth, sometimes too much information is a bad thing. And I think that's kind of hurt in cases because, they think they know everything about everything that's going on with our business and we're just commodities, and that's not the case. I think that's the one thing out of anything you get this is that I always say to clients, I'm a financial planner for your debt. Now, I'm not licensed or like that as far as financial planner, but you have these financial planners that are trying to raise your assets.
Right.
But no one ever thinks about lowering your debt.
Sorry.
Raise that ass.
Raise
that ass.
Sorry.
There you go.
Raise. My bad.
We'll hold music. We'll still do like a Friday music thing where we'll have a little, exactly.
Raise that ass up.
Old school.
Right,
so,
sorry, my bad.
Speaking of, I'm totally off the subject, but there's some awesome 80, 90 parties for like older people now that are going around. They start like a 1 o'clock on a Saturday, end at 5. So I would say older, but
I can't do that.
They got old school club music. So, all right, off the subject. So, but yeah, I think pre-approvals, one thing that I've learned for pre-approvals, if you want, so now we're kind of past the concept of when you should get them.
Well, before we go, I know where you're getting it. Before we do that, I want this to be out into the world. I've told several clients this that they're all afraid of their credit being dinged when they go for pre-approval, and I want you to check me on this. I have told them if you start shopping for a loan. If I start today and I call Mike to get pre-approved, and Mike gives me he runs my credit, I then have 14 days from that day to search as many lenders as possible, and your credit is only dinged as one hard pull. Is that correct?
So you'll have multiple pulls on your credit. But what they did about 8 years ago, it was 8 or 9 years ago, I don't know the exact date, that they changed the rules for mortgage pulls and for car pulls. Now, I'm not going to say about cars because I think certain finance companies may not be that sell cars may not consider that, but for mortgages, is that they said that you want us to go out there and you want us to go have your credit pulled, but you also want us to shop around so we're not being taken advantage of and we find we're somewhere we're comfortable with.
Correct.
So they put a rule in, and honestly, Mike, I don't remember how many days it is, but that is correct that there's a certain amount of time that you can have your credit pulled multiple times, and it's not supposed to affect your score because they want you to be able to go out and shop to make sure you're getting not just the rate or the program somebody will feel comfortable with. So I'll follow up on that detail about that, and I'll make sure that on one of our future podcasts we talk about that. So
don't take my 14 days to heart, but just know that you have time to shop.
Right, but that's important. And another reason why is I have clients who say, well, Mike, I'm not buying for 7 months. And I'll say, we still want to pull your credit now. Here's the reason why. Because you might have stuff on your credit that you're not aware of. You might have some things I say, that might affect your debt ratio and not get overly complicated and all that kind of stuff. But being able to take a look at it now is able to, all right, maybe we can get you from a 710 to a 760, and that's going to save you, an eighth or a quarter in your rate depending on your loan to value because there's a lot of different adjustments that come into play there.
Right.
So that's another thing to do. Now, what I personally sometimes will work with clients is, let's say we pull your credit today and you got an 800 score and you're putting down 25%, and occasionally you have those really clean clients that it's real simple. And, they think they might be 5 or 6 months away. I don't have to re-pull their credit. Now, this is something that they'll probably say, well, you should. I was like, I might say to the client, hey, based on what you have here, as long as you keep stuff where it's supposed to be at, and we're 6 months down the road, I won't re-pull your credit once it expires until you find that house. Okay. Now, do I do that for every client? Absolutely not, because if there's where it can break a deal. But for occasional clients, I might offer that to them.
Okay, cool. And these are the things that people think that I'm just giving you information just to get the deal done. I want to make sure that this stuff is out into the on the internet so people can actually understand that this is actually happening and this is real. And you can call me back on it. So cool. Yeah. Now go where you were going to go.
So, pre-approvals, obviously we've gotten to the past where they're important to have, at some point of the transaction earlier than later. Sets the right expectation for the client. One of the time frames, I think that also the pre-approval, as we just discussed, kind of gives you a little time frame because how long is it good for? What's it going to last? One of the things that I think the pre-approval does for the client, at least when I'm discussing with the client, is one of the first things I always say to the client. I say, I want you to give me a number, and depending on the first-time home buyer or if they've been experienced, but I'll ask them to give me a number, and if they're a first-time home buyer, I'll explain what how your mortgage payment includes taxes, insurance, and possibly mortgage insurance. And if there's an association, it's a separate fee, but it's all part of what costs.
Right.
And I'll say, hey, give me a number. Give me a number that you can afford, and then give me a number that you would go up to if you find the perfect place. And so then let's use the analogy a client might say, hey, Mike, I can afford $2,000. But if I find the perfect spot, I'll pay up to $2,300, $2,400. I try to work my pre-approvals that way. And the reason why I ask the client first is because that client might be able to afford a $3,000 payment. But they're going to tell you, they already kind of know where they're comfortable. And if I don't,
no one shares everything they have because
exactly.
They want to keep something to themselves.
So if they know, hey, if I tell them, hey, you can get a $2,800, $2,900 payment, and all of a sudden now their eyes are going, I just go up $100,000 in my purchase price. Now they're buying a property that they really should be buying. So it's almost like saving them from themselves. And so if you ask them first, then it allows it to be more of what makes sense. So again, they're looking at the right dealership versus looking at something too expensive because the difference of $120,000 or $150,000 in our house could be another furnace, could be 2,800 square feet to 3,500 square feet. So it's just a matter of because if you move in your house and 4 months later you can't stand your house because it's too expensive, and you hate your house, well, then we didn't do our job right because we're the experts. We're supposed to help make sure that you're buying something that's affordable that you can fit into. So
it's not about the biggest ticket; it's about what you're comfortable. I hate when I have people going into houses and being house poor. House poor mean they got their mortgage payment, but they have no furniture.
Exactly,
and they can't go out to eat, and that's kind of frustrating.
That's the point.
I've shown people houses that are $900,000, and then end up buying 6. That first month is rough because they're looking at what they would call a downgrade, but when they realize what they've saved and their comfort level and what they really need isn't necessarily a $1 million property. I've seen people that it's just a husband and a wife and they need 5,000 square feet. I'm like, how much do you hate your wife to need 5,000 square feet? That doesn't make any sense. You need room, but you don't need that much room. Right. You know what I mean? Not everybody hates their wife. I love mine to death. Love you, Chris. Bye. All right. But anyway, moving on. I got to cover my ass. I got.
You're right. This is all recorded.
This is all
recorded. So, and there's more to the pre-approval part of it. Kind of we're doing some summary stuff right now. I mean, I've so far down the rabbit hole, I can go with things that gets a little crazy.
Right.
So,
we can do a whole hour on just.
But I kind of wanted to just summarize certain things here and and get people's opinions. And honestly, I don't care if the opinions from a realtor or from a loan officer because some of my best things that I've learned have been other loan officers in the business. I mean, there's enough business out there where I don't consider them competitors, consider other guys trying to help home ownership. So, I'm friends with a lot of other lenders that are from different places. And, someone might give me a call and hear this and like, dude, what about this? Or, hey, this doesn't make sense. And I'm all for it. I'm always trying to educate myself.
Where someone's using another lender and they've said X, Y, and Z. Is this right? Well, not really. And I have you talk to them. They might not use you now, but they'll talk to their lender and fix it if they need to. But it's giving the people the right information.
If deal gets done.
Get the deal done.
So absolutely.
You mentioned that you wanted to get into not waiting for a rate. So let's
get
into that.
So one of the things that I never, and I'm very analytical when it comes to, obviously it's good for being in numbers, but so Mike, the rates are this high and I want to wait for them to get lower. And again, everything I talk about is my opinion, but a lot of my opinions are also sometimes based on common sense. And so, Mike, let's say rates today, and they're lower than this, but let's just for this analogy, they say rates today at 6.75, okay? And you say, I want to wait for rates to 6.25, and you're trying to buy $400,000 house. So I was like, okay, you want to wait? And he was like, and obviously, first of all, if the difference of half a point in rate, or something of that is going to make or break it, you're already buying too big of a house. Right. And so let's start with that. You should be able to have a 2-point rate swing and still be affordable. That's one way to know if you can afford your house.
Right, because you can always refi down the road if rates drop.
And so here's how I look at that. So you buy the house today, right? And you're at 6.75. 6 months down the road, 8 months down, a year down the road, rates are at 10. Okay. Well, are you happy that you
Good
bought it? Yeah.
Jesus,
Are you
no.
happy about 6.75?
Yes, you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, 6, 7, 8 months down the road, rates go from 6.75 to 5.75. Now, here's the problem if you waited. So now you're like, okay, shoot, now the rate's where I want them to be at. But on average, and actually we've been higher than this recently, but house appreciations used to say the old thing was 3 to 5%. All right. So let's say it's a year down the road. All right. And your house appreciated 5%. Well, on a $400,000 house, obviously you're talking 20 grand.
Right.
So if you're $20,000 higher buying that house.
Right.
If you look at the math,
And you're saving $100
if
a
your
month.
rate went down, but your house is 20,000. But here's the thing: when the rate was at 6.75, you might have had 1 or 2 people bidding on that property, right? Now the rate's at 5.75, and you have 10 to 15 people building on that property. Right. Well, we also had happened a couple of years ago when all of a sudden, well, the house is 400, it's now 420.
And you're spending $435.
And you're spending $435, $440, and now you just have this rate, and you put the two together, and all of a sudden you realize I'm paying worse. But mentally, you're thinking, I got to lower it. Yeah, but you're paying more money. It makes no sense. That's why everyone's like rate. That's not always the most important thing.
One thing my father used to always tell me was penny wise and dollar foolish. You're pinching the pennies, but you're spending dollars to save those pennies. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Where the smart person I say is actually you want to buy the house now if this is the house that makes sense for you, because we already put you in affordable because you said you could afford, the $2,000 a month or whatever the case might be. Then when everyone else is fighting for that house in 6 months, you're no longer fighting. You're then refinancing. Oh, and by the way, those who refinance to save $125, $100, and once in a great while, it makes sense. But they'll get the phone call, from their current lender, we can save you $160 a month on your mortgage or something like that. And they've already been paying on their house for a year and a half, and they'll refinance. Dumb. Stupid.
It is dumb. Because this, again, we'll get into this later. This is the whole podcast talking about refinancing and buying down rates. It needs to make sense because you might be spending more down the road because you take that closing costs and everything added into it, and that's a whole different.
And I don't with my clients from day one that we just shorten terms, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. Again, that's another podcast, but once in a while, somebody, maybe one of the 2 people lost a job. If it's, and things are really tight, there are those scenarios. But typically, to save $150 and pay 18 months more in payments, you do the math, it doesn't work out.
And adding in closing costs of at least $5,000. So and that's this. It doesn't make any sense. And then we'll do a whole podcast on buy downs and refis down the road. But I think this is the one thing we disagreed on the least. Was to buy down the rate. Because I think waiting for the interest rate.
It's if you can afford it now, you buy it now. If rates go higher, you're happy you bought it now. If rates go lower, you refinance.
If it makes sense.
It makes sense. And just a real quick about the refinancing, which again we'll go into later. But my favorite thing is to take someone from, let's say 28. Say, hey, you were paying $2,000 a month. Rates are lower. We're going to keep paying $2,000 a month. All we're going to do is we're going to figure out what we can shorten your term. So maybe you were at 29.2 years. Now maybe I can take you down to 26 years and save the same payment.
Right.
And I use the analogy of the car thing. So you buy a car for 60 months, you got a $500 car payment. If someone told you, how would you like to have that same $500 car payment, but instead of having 60 months left, you got 48 months left.
Right.
And then fees aren't as crazy if you're shortening your term. There's a lot of other things due into it, how long you're going to be in the house and all that kind of stuff. So trust me, I get there's other things part of it, but you're also building equity quicker because the first 10 years of a mortgage is all interest just about. So it's just about, again, it goes back to the financial planner for your debt to help you build that wealth quicker. So.
And it's the thing, too, that I think only our parents have been in their house, are the people who would stay in a house for 30 years. Nowadays, people don't stay in a house that long. So if you look at a 30-year mortgage, again, another podcast, but I'll call it rent with equity because most likely you're going to move in 10 to 15 years and not pay the whole 30-year loan and be able to take the equity and instead of paying rent where you're not building any equity. And again, whole nother podcast. Sure. That being said, did we cover enough for today, you think?
I think so. Okay. You can tell me just how fast I spoke because I'm always going to speak quickly. So
I've always told my clients this, and I want you to hear this.
It is what it is.
Mike he talks fast. He's not a fast talker. That's the thing. People, when I first heard you talk to me on the phone, I didn't trust you because you talked so damn fast. I thought you were
What?
This is what almost 10 years ago now. But you talked so fast that I thought you were just trying to sell me.
Right.
And then I realized you went out to coffee, didn't talk business, and you still talk that
There
fast.
you go.
So it's not that you're a fast talker. You just talk fast.
I
And
had
you're
a-
a very honest, equitable person. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm just saying because I only work with people that are like me, obnoxious, funny, and intelligent.
I had a
That's
client
what you
once
are.
that she most of my clients that know me know I talk fast, and so this one client, she says to her friends like, "The faster Mike talks, the better deal you got." And she's like, "What do you mean?" Because
He
that
gets
means
excited.
his mind is going so fast because he found a rabbit hole for you that he's figured out that he's going to save you this and do that, and so if he's going like that, you're in good hands because that means that his mind, this is how you get you the best deal.
One time
You know?
I'm gonna record him talking about loans and put a beat to it. You think he's rapping? It's ridiculous. But anyway, all that being
Maybe
said,
that's the way I should make more money. you know?
it's possible.
So
That being said,
appreciate it.
welcome again to the first This Might Be Coffee. And just so you remember, I'm going to put it somewhere down on the link. I want you to go to thismightbecoffee@gmail.com. Any questions, concerns, topics you want us to cover. But again, it's been a pleasure. Hope this was fun and a little bit educational.
And let us know all the screw ups because we don't know what we're doing yet. So, educate us. So if you're someone that's already been doing stuff like this, or just doesn't have to be in this business, just in general, or tips, that might help us out. Again, we want
we're going to get
the more we
tips.
know.
We're going to get hate. We're going to get love. We're going to get people say, "Oh, it's too relaxed." I don't give a shit. That's how I do business. I mean, we're both very chill individuals, and that's exactly what we want this to portray. But again, he's got a good point. Tell us what we did right, what we did wrong. Don't troll. Don't be mean. There's no reason for that. But any kind of
That means
question-
we're popular, though, right? If we're getting trolled a little bit,
if we're getting
it means
trolled,
we're all right. Yeah, so-
fantastic. And just so you do know, too, we will not get political on this podcast. So any political comments that are going to come through, we're not going to make them. We have our opinions. We're not going to make
Unless
them.
it's dealing with the Fed or something that's
We're-
a direct reflection to rates.
Right.
We'll discuss,
We'll talk
but
about
not.
it, but we are not going to
Yeah.
get political on this whatsoever. Your opinions are your opinions, and you're entitled to them, and we're entitled to ours, and we're going to leave it at that.
I agree.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much,
appreciate
and
it.
happy house hunting.
All right.